Mahmoud doesn't want a podcast with me today.
That's not true.
Oh, it's so fun to mess with you.
I'm always the bad guy anywhere I go.
Always. Ooh, I put us in full screen. I don't know how to get out of full screen. There we go. All right. What is up, my friend? How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
We have actually not talked as much today as we typically do on a Thursday.
Well, I will tell you something. In the past Thursday to Thursday, I had
Thursday to
internet for half a day.
Oh, so you're just struggle
I'm
bussing.
I'm hotspotting, I'm programming on my phone. I'm just
Just
loving
making it happen. Just making it happen, baby. Sometimes it be like that.
loving life right now. And finally today I had the guy work for 4 hours at my house.
Why does it take so long to get internet at houses? Like, I
It
don't get
it's
it.
not that. It's not the installation part. There was a problem and he had to dig up multiple houses. Yeah, like the line under was not connected to the main box that's actually a few feet out of the thing.
Love
A few
that.
100 feet, sorry. So, anyways, back to this.
Oh, it's all good. I mean, that'll be people have to excuse your little laggy on the video, but your audio is actually coming in great the whole time. So
I'm
that's
still
fine.
lagging.
A little bit, yeah, but it's fine.
Well,
There's nothing you can do about it. I'll just take it out of your paycheck.
sure. I'm at the gym's Wi-Fi. It's not even mine.
Oh, all right. I wanted to talk today about the future
Oh,
of CrossFit, not of CrossFit the business or CrossFit the sport or all the things everybody else likes to get on their hot mic and argue about that is completely pointless and a waste of their time. I want to talk about the environment and the ecosystem and the competitive landscape changing and how we think athletes should navigate that. And I think, ooh, you better turn that off
yes, sir.
or that's going to drive me nuts. Ding, 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 ding. We get it. You're
Well,
popular, Mahmoud.
I can't turn the computer off, but I can turn my phone, so otherwise I
Uh,
won't be able to hear you.
this is why you don't have a Mac, people, right here. This.
One
This is why
second.
you
1 second,
don't have a
since you want 1 second. You talk to people.
Where's he going? All right, well, Mood's leaving me. So to continue to intro to what we're going to talk about a little bit here, um, obviously the landscape is changing with the open being what people peak for is still relevant for a large majority of the people who do CrossFit, but there's not kind of this next stage of quarterfinals that we've had the last couple years. And obviously only so many people move on to semifinals. So what we're starting to see is athletes competing or doing qualifiers at a bit higher of a frequency or a tempo than they typically would do in previous years. You know, previous years people would do the open and then they would make quarterfinals or they wouldn't, and then they would do maybe one competition or one like a local competition in the summer, maybe a qualifier in the fall, and then they would do, you know, a TFX, a Wadapalooza, or something of that nature, and then they would be kind of leading back into the open for the next year. So with those things, that was kind of the way it was before, but now there's just been, at least on our end, a little bit of an uptick in people looking to compete a little bit more frequently. Um, and I think that dramatically changes the way athletes need to train. I have no idea if your headphones are going to work.
They're working.
Yeah, they're working. You can hear me?
Yep.
Oh, sick. So with the changes to the season and people going to be competing and doing qualifiers, it seems a little bit more frequently, whether that's because they're trying to get to a semifinal level and there's 7 to 10 different semifinal or semifinal level events, right? Or if they're just trying to do other competitions that may not be semifinals but are regional competitions they want to go do. Athletes are ending up in this situation where they're doing a lot of qualifiers, a lot of competing, or at least more than they have in the last couple of years. And I think, to preface where we're coming from with this conversation, you and I, and I think where we steer Ascend a lot of the times is, at least in the past, we have always brought a lot of traditional sports science to how we train people. Not necessarily in the sense of exercise selection or how we necessarily program the day to day. It impacts those things in some ways, but you and I, and since Ascend's foundation, has always been a big proponent of annual periodization, right? You're going to have a long off-season block. You're going to have some preseason blocks. You're going to have your in-season training. Then you're going to have a little bit of time of pure nothingness. And then you go back into your off-season, because by and large, you can't really argue that 70 years of data on block periodization and phasic training is more than likely the best way to train athletes for a long period of time, right? Especially when you're talking about doing something as high intensity or demanding on the body as CrossFit, right? So we've always applied that kind of a framework. But the question is, and my hypothesis is, annual periodization for the CrossFit athlete is dead. What is your opinion on that?
I think it depends on one. I mean, we're looking at one season, right? We're not sure what's
Sure,
gonna
this is
happen.
this is all under the massive hypothetical that everything doesn't change next year.
Right.
The
If this
WFP might vanish and things might go back to the way things were.
right, if things don't change from this year, then I would say, depending on the athlete and their venture, if they're going for just one competition versus two competitions, if they're still just doing the CrossFit Games season and they know that they're going to qualify to the games or at least semifinals, then I don't think that periodization is dead for that athlete.
Yes.
If they're doing both WFP and they have a competition that's in March, where the Open is, basically March to mid-April, and then they have another WFP. What is it called?
Qualifier.
The Not the actual
Oh,
meet.
the tour event.
Yeah, the tour, and then they have semifinals, and then they have the games, and then they have the finals. Then yeah, at this point they're competing more than they're training, basically. Like they're
Yeah, and the big issue for them ends up being, it's not the density at it's not the amount that they're competing. It's the fact that it's not incredibly dense. It spans a large amount of the calendar year,
Mhm.
right? If you were doing 3 or 4 in-person competitions in 3 months, that still works by and large for an annual periodization framework, right?
Mhm.
But it's the fact that when you mark all these things on the calendar, in online semifinals is at the beginning of April, TFX is at beginning of May, Syndicate is at the end of May. Like, we start getting these, mayhems or NCCs in June, mayhems at the beginning of April. We start getting into this thing where it's spanning almost months, where you don't have enough time to go through cessation and lose fitness to then regain fitness or
Mhm.
work capacity, right? So I think that's a good point you bring up. Like,
And
it does work still for some.
I will say that for the athletes that are not going to make it to semifinals, with the absence of quarterfinals, it doesn't make sense that they should have an annual periodization, because they're basically going to peak. Let's say they're even doing the Community Cup, they're going to peak twice within the same 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, they're going to probably peak one more time for like a TFX or a Wadapalooza or something like of that caliber at the in that end of the calendar year.
Yep.
So that's basically three different peaks that they're looking at, with potentially some local comps in the middle.
Sure.
So yeah, at this point, it's more of an even smaller season. You have
Yeah.
basically a quarterly competition.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're gonna periodize a quarter, that's fine, but it's basically a macro cycle at this point, and you're just breaking into smaller mesocycles.
Right. And if you're periodizing a quarter, if you're periodizing a macro cycle, the theoretical framework that you would apply to a block that short, you don't really reap the benefits of the magic that occurs in annual periodization. The
Yeah,
magic the magic in annual periodization is the amount of time you spend getting a consistent stimulus to a certain energy system or progression, right? I feel like that's something very overlooked.
it's
Is
the
Go
amount of
ahead.
reps, the amounts of reps done, the amounts of
Yeah.
uh, practice being done on the rower, the amount of time spent at RPM 75, the amount of how many times did you deadlift this specific percentage or like this in a it's just not like it's not, oh, we're just gonna get bigger biceps and bigger butts, right? Like it's
Yeah, and you just can't, like, if you're only working with 12 to, I would say,
it's
9 to
so
12
hard to get the
weeks,
volume
yeah, you don't get that time of, that
because you're
accumulation
prioritizing
block.
intensity at this point.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you can't have intensity and volume together.
Well, you have to spike up to competitive volume metrics
Right.
faster,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, like, I think at this point people are starting to actually discuss, what you and I have long described as volume landmarks,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas like before a competition, you need to be doing X amount of total bar, X amount of ring muscle ups under fatigue, Y of all these different things. Again, the beauty of long periodization is you can build up to those numbers over time,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes down your injury risk, it takes down all of those things, and then you can layer in intensity as the volume goes up so that you're doing a large amount of volume with relative intensity. You can't do that every 12 weeks, because you're not getting a meaningful cessation, you're not getting meaningful time off
Mm-hmm.
from the volume to actually repair, and then you're also not getting enough time to build up to the volume, right? I'm the fucking poster boy for this. Like, over the last 2 years, I don't know how many workouts I've done where my capacity could write checks that my body wasn't ready to cash,
Mm-hmm.
right? I did it last fall. You programmed at the gym one of the benchmarks, the C2 bike ring muscle up benchmark that we have, and I like smashed it because I had the capacity to do that many ring muscle ups. Then I woke up the next day and my bicep was destroyed and I couldn't put my arm over my head for a week, right? Like, that's a perfect example
Mm-hmm.
of what we're trying to describe here. So my question to you, to get your opinion on, and we can kind of riff on this or chop it up a little bit on this, is if we're just going to assume and make the assumption that everybody knows they should be doing annual periodization, or they should have been up until this point. If you weren't, I'm sorry, you should have been, but you missed that boat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
where do we go now? What kind of a structure? Like, we're getting a little more in the nuts and bolts than we normally do, and this is stuff I think we need to do more often. What do you think? How should athletes structure their framework now, where they don't have the luxury of 6 months to maybe build up to a competition, or and maybe they, I think it's an important disclaimer to put out, maybe they would have the luxury if they wanted to,
Yeah, I
but
mean nothing is obligatory, so
right, nothing's,
mandatory.
yeah, nothing's mandatory, but at the same time, I don't know very many athletes I coach who I could be like, hey, you're not gonna do anything meaningful competition wise for 6 to 8 months.
It also, you know why? Because that used to be the norm back in like
Hmm.
2017, 2015. It's because the reward is not enough.
Exactly.
Like, okay, maybe then maybe we can contend to get to semifinals, but now it's online.
Right. So it loses the luster.
Right. So like at this point, I'd rather do six TFXs, right, and just win it.
Yeah, yeah. They're athletes are going to hunt the athlete experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what they want. That's what all
And, I-
these semifinals or
and,
qualifiers. That's what they give people.
and I think that like that's something like people keep saying High Rocks is taking over, whatever, whatever. It's because it's offering a consistent experience
Yes,
that
that's all it is.
CrossFit is losing.
Yes.
It's
That's it.
not that it's a better fitness model. I'm not saying Hyrox is better or worse. I'm not saying CrossFit is better or worse, but that is why Hyrox is going up in money value
Yep.
and CrossFit is going down.
100%.
Um, I was just at Houston, and the amount of posts that talk about, oh, the atmosphere. I was like, I mean, the games were a louder atmosphere. It was a more electric atmosphere at some point. It
Yeah,
just
for sure.
hasn't been, right.
Right.
And that's where like that experience of like being on the floor, and that's what I even like try and tell like my athletes doing high rocks. I was like, hey, you're in that tunnel, you soak every bit of that.
That tunnel is hype.
You soak every bit of those 10 minutes that you're in there. That whatever the lady's saying, whatever the video's on, the music, all that, this is the spotlights on you.
Yep.
Maybe nobody's watching because it's not an individual sport, or well, it's not a, I guess, a followable sport, but this is you. And
Yep.
that's what's missing by taking away semifinals, by taking away quarterfinals, by taking away regionals, all that. Like I do like that the TFX, I don't know about Syndicate if it's doing the same thing or not, and the NCC are having some like lower, sorry, lower is the wrong word, non-elite levels.
Community divisions.
Right.
I know Syndicate is. I'm
Yeah.
sure NCC is as
I
well.
think NCC is as well, and I think that the like something that I saw at Wadapalooza is that you're that close to Patrick Vellner working out. You're that close to Sydney Wells warming up. You're that close to Catherine Davis' daughter. It's an unreal experience for you as a CrossFit fan and as an athlete in development to,
Mhm.
yes, this is worth what I've been training. Just that,
Right.
let alone my result.
Right.
So to choose to not to do any of competitions for nothing, for an online open basically again,
Right.
is not, it's not rewarding enough. That being said, if you're an athlete who has, who's basically a level of, you were trying to get to regionals at some point, or you're not making to semifinals just yet, I think that the way to go about that is to have 3 to 4 month cycles,
Mhm.
and that could be divided into multiple smaller like phases.
Mhm.
Each of those should start with like, hey, we're going to spend 2 to 3 weeks focusing on building capacity and skill, building capacity and endurance and strength, and then moving into slowly as you go through the next two and second and third month, you're building that like mixture together. So it's a very small version of what we used to do in a year, but it's
Mhm.
being done in a month. So it's a full cycle. It's a
Mhm.
full annual cycle being done in 3 to 4 months, and
Right.
it will result in some outcome, some progress.
Yeah. Well, you're basically, because your time constraint is condensed, you're, instead of taking and moving up every metric over time, you're taking a more targeted approach, right? You're going to pick 2 to 3 things that are maybe the most apparent things that need to be worked. And then sure, maybe, something like a strength progression is a little bit longer and more consistent throughout
Right.
because that's going to take more time, but you're kind of picking maybe one energy system and one machine, or two, and then one maybe body weight movement, and then one, I don't know, mixed modal combination, a squatting and a pulling, redundant hinging, whatever. And you're kind of focaling in on that for 6 to 12 weeks at the most, um, leading up to whatever they have to go do next. Um, and I think while you do that, one of the biggest differences between annual periodization on a long term and then more of this like quarterly periodization, if you wanted to call it that, is uh, you're just keeping a lot more classic CrossFit in the mix, right?
Basically, yeah, you're gonna be doing CrossFit kind of year round.
Right. And this is something maybe that is a little bit different than us than other methodologies or thought processes or camps. And I know some camps or people think about, very pure CrossFit in the sense. I am a firm believer, um, unless you've been doing this at a high level for a decade, maybe, you probably shouldn't ever not be doing a monostructural weightlifting gymnastics triplet every week. And the reason for that isn't necessarily the high intensity, floor yourself with all that. It's the fact that in the way I always describe this, and you and I have talked about this many times, an MGW triplet, that is the most complex sport expression of CrossFit most times, right? AMRAP 15, 12 clean and jerks, 15 chest to bar, 15 cal row, whatever, right? Athletes need exposure to that because they need to understand how to approach something like that and strategize it, right? And that's
Mhm.
not to say that you don't necessarily get better at that by improving your row pace, improving your chest to bar capacity, improving your clean and jerk barbell cycling in a single modality setting, improving your strength, blah, 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 blah. But the fact is, you have to understand the culmination of those things. And there's just something about the secret sauce of CrossFit that if you stay away from for too long, it's going to punch you in the face when you come back. And that's something like even in our off-season annual periodization protocols that we've used in the past, there's always a classic CrossFit workout at
Mhm.
least once a week, right? Because the reality is just most people need to be better at pacing that kind of stuff and strategizing it and learning, right?
Learning is basically the key word here.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So it's I think what you brought up one valid strategy for people there that they can use to approach kind of these multiple competitions or qualifiers in a more condensed timeline. Um, and I think another thing people can use and do is kind of take a concurrent approach to their training and then just slightly bias it, right? And that's something I've always been a big fan of concurrent training. If you guys don't know who are listening, what concurrent training is, it's basically um, training multiple qualities or multiple things simultaneously. It requires a little bit deeper understanding of programming so that you can manage fatigue and all of those things. But um, that is another effective thing you could do. You could take a concurrent training model to your training and then just kind of slightly skew it towards your weaknesses or prioritize those so that you're getting continual touches on, everything technically, but you're making sure to put a couple eggs in the basket extra of, that those weaknesses that you need to work on.
Hmm.
And I think one last I meant to bring this up a minute ago, not one last thing, but I meant to bring this up when you were kind of talking about the 12-week blocks and only working on a couple things. Um, I think it's worth noting the reason annual periodization worked, and I wholeheartedly believe it works, especially if you have one date or two dates on the calendar that you can build to, is that concept of you have so much time to raise everything, right? And you're not
Hmm.
getting derailed, you're not getting all these other things that are going on. And to be honest, like, not so humble brag, but annual periodization is the reason Kelly Baker qualified for the CrossFit Games. Hattie Canio qualified for the CrossFit Games, almost won her semifinal. Einhorn qualified for the CrossFit Games. Like, they had a year in the lab building and building and building. And at the Open, they were pretty good. And at quarterfinals, they were pretty good. At semifinals, they did what they needed to do to make it to the games. But in all those prior stages, they weren't peaked. They weren't blowing people's socks off, all this, that, and the other, because the plan was that fucking weekend.
Hmm.
That's the power of annual periodization if you know how to use it correctly. But again, if the ecosystem changes to a point where that's not feasible, you have to find another way to manage things, right? And there are other ways to manage things. But I think there's a lot of, I wanted to say that because I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of how useful is actual annual periodization. And in my opinion, in the last 2 years, we've proven and shown the function of annual periodization when you have an athlete that buys into it.
Hmm.
with so you said 3 to 4 competitions, so basically one every season, right? Do you think
Yeah.
there's value in athletes trying to diversify the skill level of those competitions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Open is gonna be basic for everybody. That's one competition.
Sure, sure. So where I'm going with that is, you know, my brain went to a conversation you actually had with my wife when she was deciding to do Monster Games quals or NCC.
Hmm.
And I had talked to her about it, and then she talked to you, and you said, "Hey, here's the deal. If you make Monster Games, you're probably have a better chance of making it in the qualifier, and you'll probably be able to go be more competitive.
Hmm.
Versus if you make NCC, it's going to be harder to make through the qualifiers because it's a semifinal, air quotes, right? People are going to want to go there. And obviously the level of competition is probably going to be a little bit higher, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's kind of a not a tier difference, so to speak, but there's just a different playing field for those two competitions. And that
Hmm.
made me like, would you steer some athletes to go to a competition or try to qualify for a competition that, hey, this is going to be hard, but we're kind of getting in deeper water, and then maybe the next one they do, if it works out with the year and how events are planned, it's like, hey, this is one we're going to go qualify, and like we're going to go play, we're going to go have fun, we're going to really get after it, and we're going to try to compete and like win or podium or top 5 or something like that. Do you think that's a good idea for athletes to kind of play with?
Yeah, I think it's a good milestone to like one. Some athletes need to be pushed out of their comfort zone and not get a reality check, but more like, okay, what's the field actually looking like?
That was an amazing freeze frame. Anyways, go ahead.
Sorry.
That was so funny.
um, they're able to hear me though.
Yeah, yeah. Your audio's great.
Okay. And then sometimes those athletes or other athletes possibly are not confident enough and they need to be shown that they can win or they can compete on a stage that is something that they feared, a stage that they feared,
Yep.
right? So it depends on the athlete. I would say it's case by case. Some athletes might be at the top level and they just don't need to go at the lower level,
Sure.
right? Like you got Hattie, you got Alina. Like they're always gonna do probably they're gonna want to compete at the highest level. Not
Right.
and if I even suggest a lower level, it would be more of a like I have to have a really really good reason for them
Right.
to compete at a lower level.
It's
Uh,
probably going to be to go win money.
right. Yeah. Yeah. But that being said, I think it's a case by case, and I don't think that there is a one fits all strategy when it comes to that.
Hmm.
It's is your athlete confident in themselves? What competitions have they done already, and how did they do? And what was their biggest mental block in that competition?
Yeah.
And then how long have they been working on it? Have they been already been doing annual periodization? Have they been like I know that I pushed, for example, an athlete to do the I think it's called pro in Wad Gods or whatever the highest level is,
Hmm.
and I was like, hey, we're just gonna go. This is a competition you don't have to qualify for, and I need you to have a feel of who you're chasing,
Hmm.
and that was important,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I was like, hey, zero expectations. You're not going to win.
Yeah.
And then some other athletes, I'm begging to go compete to win, and they're like, I don't want to. I was like, dude, you got that. You got that. Like, I need you to light that fire. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a balance, especially if you have athletes that are kind of at the precipice where they could do either.
Hmm.
Um, but I think there's a lot of value, and sometimes athletes look over this. It's like there's value in going and getting a win.
Absolutely.
Like that can build a lot of confidence. And there's also equal value in just the hard fucking truth of you got to wade into some deep water sometimes because that's where you learn, right?
It's like throwing somebody in water and teaching them how to swim.
Yeah, it's just you're not like the first time an athlete goes from competing in the RX division of a competition and then returning the next year or doing another competition and they're in the pro division, the lessons they learn on the floor competing against that caliber of athlete are invaluable. You cannot
They
teach
can
that.
only get it at a competition. You,
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't simulate that in
you can't
training.
tell them imagine that there are 19 other people that are gonna be moving that fast, and they're like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you just have to have, and you have to. It's the speed at which that higher division moves, coupled
Mhm.
with the intensity of their own desire to do
Yep.
well,
Yep.
right? Well, what other thoughts do you have kind of on this topic or subject? I know you've thought about it a lot, and we've talked about it.
I only have one wish that through an organization, call it whatever, the season is announced beforehand.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, buddy.
Like all the CrossFit competitions submit their goals and intentions January 1st.
That would be wonderful, but
It
how
would
would
be
you hold? I would
amazing.
hold
It
your
would be
breath.
so nice, and it would be just make everybody happier, including those competitions.
Why do you say that? Because we've been doing qualifiers or competitions with people since
I
October.
don't know. Angelina has been doing competitions since she started CrossFit.
Don't get me started on that qualifier. Don't don't. I don't want to talk about it.
Like a
I
6 months long qualifier.
I'm going to say nothing but nice things, and I think the workouts are great, and I can't wait for her to go compete there when this is all
And
over.
I agree.
And 100 days of qualifier workouts has been awesome.
Should be a title of a book.
It's been awesome. Um, yeah, I think it's worth athletes opening their eyes to just the changes, and it's not, back in the old days of CrossFit, the earlier days, I think there was definitely that mantra or just style of training where it was just smash yourself every day. Right. And then over time, coaching education got better. Athletes figured some things out, and we kind of got in. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yes, but also it was all CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
It was not periodized.
No, it wasn't. Right.
It was all CrossFit. So like what I'm trying to say is like for people who are like seeing this like discouraged, people still got fitter just doing CrossFit every day.
100%. And
Yeah.
I have said it before, and I'll say it again. I think truly, if you do cr- just pure CrossFit, the way Greg intended it, not what you can do in an hour class, but if you go truest OG, it will be you can progress it and you will get fitter.
That's
It
basically concurrent training in its simplest form.
yes, 100%. The only reason a brand like us we don't use that is the time horizon for improvement is very 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 long
Right.
and
Yeah.
very slow.
So think about this. I think to put this in a more of a visual, think about annual periodization allows you to hammer one thing, or sorry, a few things for 6 months, right?
Yeah, 6
And
months or a
take
year.
that to the next level. But that because you've spent 6 months just focusing on just the skills and strengths, and then you put it back into CrossFit or whatever, that range of benefits has gotten that far. Sorry, has gotten that
Right.
far,
It doesn't make sense at that point.
right? But because if you're doing CrossFit training, just CrossFit throughout the whole year, your focus on those things are a little bit less because you're focusing on so much more in combination together.
Right.
So your range of improvement will go from here to here over the same amount of time. And that's
Right.
theoretically. But
Right.
will you get fitter? 100%. Will
Right.
you get fitter at things that you might have not gotten fitter at faster because you wouldn't have focused on? Also, yes. Like
Right.
let's say you wouldn't have put that on your agenda, but you've been doing barbell cycling every twice a week or 3 times a week.
Right.
You will get better at barbell cycling faster than you would have if you did annual periodization.
Right. Yeah. There's always a case to be made to kind of hedge towards your weaknesses, whether
Right.
it's annual periodization or concurrent periodization or, phase like block periodization, whatever. Like any way you want to slice and dice it, there's
Mm-hmm.
always a case to be made for that. I think it's an overlooked thing but I do think if people do, if somebody just wants to be fit and healthy for life and they do true OG CrossFit, like one day is just a heavy day, one day's a triplet, one day is a couplet, one day, whatever is a chipper, 2 on, 1 off, that whole thing. If you do it the way, because if you go back to the old main site articles, or main site workouts, there would be a day of training that's like an hour bike ride.
Hmm.
It's like that from a stimulus perspective is super valuable,
Yeah.
right? That just doesn't make it in CrossFit classes because we can't just be like, hey, go sit on the C2 bike for an hour because people are going to be like, this is fucking boring and I don't want to do
Hmm.
that, right?
Right.
So that's why that part of that is why things evolved the way they did, right? Um, yeah, I think we kind of covered the nuts and bolts of this. I think one thing to leave people with is, me saying annual periodization is dead is a little tongue in cheek. But I don't think if the ecosystem continues to progress the way it is, that taking an annual periodization approach is going to lead to athletes enjoying their year because they're only going to be mostly prepared for like one competition and then absolutely prepared for one other competition.
Hmm.
So you're just kind of, especially if you're an athlete that's just not at an elite level yet, like if you're a games athlete, then sure, like you said in the very beginning, you can do that. But if you're a quarterfinal level athlete, which I don't know why we keep saying that because it's not a thing anymore, but everybody knows what we mean, or a low level semifinal athlete or an intermediate athlete, you're going to want to go compete at
If you're
other
in the void.
times. Yeah, if you're in the void and nobody cares about you except coaches, you're going to want to go compete at other places. So it may not make that much sense anymore to bias your training so heavily one direction for such an extended period of time.
Hmm.
You need to keep things a little bit more balanced and focused on a shorter time scale so that you can continue to make progress in the things that are holding you back the most while staying in touch with what might be asked of you at a competition.
Right.
Right.
Also, Connor Romero, if you're listening, please add tongue in cheek into the list.
Yeah, tongue in cheek. He's already upset with me today because well, one, he's upset with me because he has to do double grace next week, and
Why is he upset with that?
it's just more clean and jerks than he'd probably like to do at once. And then he's also upset with me because I told him that I lost 3 of our podcast episodes, and one of them was the money.
I'm more upset with you than he is.
For sure, you are, but. I told him, I said, hey, we need to get another podcast with you because I may or may not have lost the one that we recorded. And he goes, I'm bringing that up. I was
we're
like, yeah,
gonna have to go through your computer.
it's gone, Mahmoud.
We're
Gone.
gonna
It's
have
not.
to double check that.
It's not on the computer. It's not on the interwebs. It's not in my like OneDrive backup. It's completely gone. All right, closing things. The new cycle for Ascend Athlete has started, our kind of first post-open cycle, Cascade cycle. As we record this, we are in week 1. I believe when this probably comes out, we'll be in week 2. Super excited about the cycle. Very excited for some of the progressions, things we have going on in that. So if you're interested in that, ascendathletetraining.com or Ascend Athlete on Sugarwod. You can find all of our group programs there. Compete, train, weightlifting, some new things coming shortly. And then, as always, if you guys are interested in one-on-one coaching, whether your sport of choice is competitive CrossFit, High Rocks, we just had I'm going to brag, my High Rocks athlete just went and crushed the Houston High Rocks and had like a 5-minute PR, which is
Yep.
bonkers.
I had an athlete who did her first pro who crushed it as well. She got 10th in her age group.
That's sick.
Yeah. And yeah, we've had a lot of athletes do that. That was a fun High Rocks. Dallas is coming up. If anybody's gonna gear up to that, now is the time to start.
When is Dallas? Not that
November.
I'm doing it. I need to know just so I know, but I'm not doing it. Don't worry.
I'll be there, you guys, so you can
Yeah.
see me there.
I mean, I might be there. I don't know, but I'm not
Yeah,
doing it.
it's end of November, right before Thanksgiving.
One High Rocks was enough for me, I think. We'll see. I'm sure I'll end up doing another one eventually, but
You will.
one was enough. So, Ascend Athlete Training, like I said, on Sugarwod, Ascend Athlete on Instagram. Always feel free to hit up Mahmoud or myself. Our Instagram handles are linked above. We want to help you guys out. Did I miss
Also,
anything?
no, but if you have any topics that you want us to cover on our podcast, please comment below
Yes.
or send us a DM.
Comment them below if you have topics, questions, or people you'd like us to have on the show.
Or phrases you want Tristan to say.
I'm not saying people's phrases if there's not money.
Only phrases.
Yeah, only phrases. If you want me to say things that y'all tell me to say, there's going to be a monetary value attached to that.
Fair enough.
I'm just saying, I'll do it, but I'm going to get paid to do it. So I'll be a paid spokesperson for the comment section.
Oh man, check the OnlyFans out in the comments.
All right. With that, we're going to get off of here. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. All the things, like, subscribe, all that stuff. I hate asking people to do stuff like that, but it really does help. So go do that stuff. Peace out.